Well, it's June the 3rd, and I'm back from vacation. I had a few videos I recorded before I left, which I put out, which I think people hopefully kept the channel going well during the period, some good topics. I want to address something that happened kind of during that period, which, of course, was the Memorial Day speech by President Biden, which I thought was quite outrageous and insulting. I mean, to seriously claim that the greatest threat the country faces is white supremacists is ridiculous. I mean, it would even be wrong to say that the greatest threat that the black community faces is white supremacists. I mean, the greatest threat that they face, I think, clearly is criminal gangs, mostly drug gangs and other criminals that operate in underprivileged neighborhoods. I mean, the black on black crime is clearly dominating that. The hate crimes against Asians and Jews are predominantly perpetrated by the same community. It's just ridiculous stuff. And that's Joe Biden's attempt to continue to divide the country and to keep upwardly mobile African Americans from voting their pocketbook rather than voting some kind of ideology of resentment. If you like these videos, remember to subscribe. I'm getting my subscription up a little bit here in recent week or two, so I appreciate that. And you can give me a like and make any comments you have about my videos and what the content. So, yeah, this is an ongoing theme of Biden is this idea of divisiveness and trying to pit one group against the other, which fits right in the mold of the critical race theory idea, which is interesting. After years of trying to get rid of racism, we're now trying to use racism from the Democrat side for political advantage. Ironically enough, historically, of course, the Democrats have used white racism against blacks back in the bad old days, right? And now it's the other way around. Try to use black racism against whites. I don't know where the increasing numbers of multiracial people will fit into this is unclear. I mean, how should Barack Obama feel about this whole subject, right? Since he's 50% African descent and 50% European descent, right? So that's a good question. But you know, and even Kamala Harris is part Indian and African American. So that, again, you have these situations, and trying to use race as a basis is just totally against everything we've been trying to achieve in this country on a pretty much bipartisan basis for decades, which is to try to get everybody just to treat everybody as they are and get away from prejudices. And so it goes. And now we're also, again, being hit with all these ransomware attacks, which seem to indicate that the Russians see weakness in the Biden policies, and they feel that this is an opportune moment to move forward. The degree to which the Russian government is directly involved in this is unclear, but one would tend to think, given the nature of that state, that they could do something about it if they wanted to. And they probably are using this approach as sort of an attempt to see how far they can push Biden before he reacts in any effective way. On the other front, I've been hearing a lot that came out recently about Dr. Fauci's emails and the whole story around the origins of the coronavirus. And I'm beginning to feel somewhat vindicated here. Many videos back, I suggested the idea, could coronavirus have been a bioweapon development project that somehow got released, perhaps by accident or deliberately. And I point out that the downside of the deliberate theory is the fact it doesn't see how that it could have not affected the Chinese people more than it did. Again, we don't know exactly how much it's affected them, but if you look at the numbers that are reported, the Chinese infections are basically less than, say, the South Korean, quite a bit less than the Japanese at this point. And so you're left with a kind of befuddlement of the idea that it's hard to see how that's possible. One thought would be that somehow they found a way to ethnically or racially target the virus so that it doesn't go after people of certain Chinese genetic markers, and that maybe other people in East Asia have similar characteristics and so are also somewhat less affected by it than people, say, of other groups, including people from India, who aren't really the same racial group as the Chinese, and of course Europeans and some African descendants, etc. So this could very well be the case, although it could just be a complete coincidence. The other idea is, since it is a SARS-type virus, and since the Asian communities have had to deal with those before, maybe there's a immunity has somehow built up over time to this sort of thing in the area. That's hard to know. But anyway, it's an area of hot topic, and it also looks like it's pretty clear-cut that Fauci knew a lot more than he was saying, that he's been deceptive. They knew that basic cloth masks were basically ineffective in preventing the transmission of the virus, but decided to go along with this for some kind of political reason or whatever. And in fact, it's a complex issue. At this point, it's almost become a political symbol to some extent. I don't know. I think the answer is that N95 masks, if done in a sterile fashion, can be somewhat effective, pretty effective, but that lesser masks probably not so much. Although apparently in some environments, like in airports and on airplane flights, you have to wear them anyhow under threat of federal penalty. So, as I learned in my last trip. So anyhow, but yeah, these are interesting times, and so we want to kind of keep on the subject here as to what's happening. As the other issues are these ongoing voting laws, I noticed that the Democrats in Texas managed to block the voting bill by walking out at the last minute or something. Probably, I would suggest, I was thinking all along that the legislature wasn't pushing it fast enough. If they'd got it done earlier, I think that tactic might have been less effective. However, they're going to be calling a special session, and I think this is a natural thing for the Democrats to do, considering their viewpoints. But it also shows, I think, clearly that the Democrats do have a policy of having weak voting restrictions in order that there can be more voting fraud. I think that they know that most of the voting fraud comes from their communities and their followers and not from the Republican communities, and so they see it as a net advantage. And that's why you have things like the H.R. 1 bill pending in the Congress and so forth. Hopefully the filibuster will hold and that will not get passed, but we have to realize that this is a year of real risk to the integrity of the country, and we'll have to see just exactly how this pans out. They're continually saying they're pressuring people, although it looks like Sinema is holding, and Manchin are so far holding them pretty firm. And I get the feeling there are probably other Democrat senators that are of similar mind, that they don't necessarily want to take a public statement. But I noticed when there was a chance to override the parliamentarian, there was like 8 Democrats that voted against doing it on the minimum wage increase bill. And I don't think it was because these 8 Democrats really wanted to vote against increasing the minimum wage completely. I think maybe some of them didn't want to go quite to $15. But I think in general, I think it was more of a statement about trying to keep the rules of the Senate kind of intact. And the other thing we're clearly facing here, and to kind of come to the end of this video, is the ongoing inflation threat. I mean, with this massive spending that's going on, there is a growing increase of a lot of commodities of food and lumber and so forth. Gasoline are going up in price. The gasoline price increases so far, I think, reflect mostly just a return to more of a normal economy. But from this point on, the additional increases are going to indicate, I think, policy issues. And there's no doubt that the Biden administration is taking measures to diminish oil production, and certainly on a going forward basis. In other words, I don't know that the lack of drilling new wells has had any real impact to date, or much impact, but it will have as we go forward in time, as old wells become depleted. And if we don't have replacements, we'll then become more dependent on foreign sources of energy. And while there's a lot of talk about, developing, going to electric vehicles and so forth, those sort of transformations to become effective will take a significant amount of time. There really isn't the infrastructure to really support electric vehicles as a complete replacement, certainly. And there's a lot of issues about the availability of various rare earth materials that would be necessary in order to promote an electric economy. Plus, where does the additional electric capacity come from? While trying to still push toward their reduced CO2 emissions goals. So all in all, I think you can say that this is a kind of an irrational strategy, not too well thought out, and eventually it's going to be harmful to the American public. Well, Aaron, I'll wrap this video up for now and get it out. And again, we'll continue to keep you posted on developments.